Well, the arts, and there's Susan. So we start registration for spring classes next week. We have an adult coloring day on Thursday, starting at 5:30 for a couple of hours. And if you're interested and want to come and relax and color with us, we're going to announce our classes that night. And then they'll be up on the website that day for registration. We are very proud of this class. We've been working with Susan McCain for probably 4 years now, is that correct? Yeah, about 4 years. So almost as old as ArtPlay. Susan is a phenomenal teaching artist. She certainly has the qualifications in her studies and the body of work that followed her to us. And she is just a phenomenal person. If you haven't gotten to know her, don't know her already, find some time tonight and say hi. But I'm going to let her introduce the piece. So, ladies and gentlemen, my friend and brilliant teaching artist, Susan McCain. And this is our, I wanted to say something real quick. This is our new director of, she's over education, but she's also our director of engagement for the Stevens Center. She's just moved from New York here, Amy Miller. So.
So, I know some of you don't have one of these little pieces you might like to take home. Does everybody out here have one? You got one? Go ahead, we have a bunch down here. So, what we're doing tonight is something we just tried for the first time this year, and it's taking the acting studios instead of just, every week doing a scene or a monologue and so forth. We've actually started with this one class, this is the beginning of it, to get together and begin to get to know who's in the class, and then search and find a play that works for those people, which this time we got really lucky, crazy, because I didn't know some of these people at first, and of course now I do. But I think you'll see they really fit their roles quite well. And the piece we're doing is Trifles, and if you don't know it, it's an old historic piece, but there's a little bit about it on the page that I gave you, and it's by Susan Glaspell, who was somewhat of a little feminist writer back in the turn of the century, so that can give you an idea of what she was about even way back then. It's a fun show. We've had a lot of fun building it and kind of creating it with one another and getting people to know one another as they work with one another, which this is the first time they've really worked together, which is pretty phenomenal. So we're happy about everybody. And after the show, I think you've already met them, but please meet them again. And I think that's all I need to do, but I have someone that has one more thing that she's going to say, and this happens to be the daughter of Liz, who you'll see they look a lot alike, actually, so you'll know who she is. Would you like to come up and say what we talked about? Okay, can I tell her?
Enjoy our show. Please turn off your phones. Welcome to our show. Please turn off your phones. Enjoy the show.
Oh, and he has a part that says what? Good job. So good job. Want to tell him good job?
Welcome to our show. Turn off your phones. Oh my gosh.
That's really nice. Let me tell you. Okay, I'm just going to give lights. You get some lights. So I'm going to say lights, okay? Lights.
This feels good. Come up to the fire, ladies. Come on.
I'm not cold. Mr. Hale, you tell Mr. Henderson just what you saw yesterday morning.
By the way, has anything moved? Are things just as you left them yesterday?
Just the same. When it dropped below zero last night, I figured I'd send Frank out to get the fire going. No sense getting pneumonia with the big case on. But I told Frank not to touch anything except for the stove. And you know Frank.
Somebody should have been left here yesterday.
Oh, yesterday I had to send Frank over to Morris City to pick up that guy who went crazy. You know, I had more than my hands full, and I knew you'd be back from Omaha by today. But I knew as long as I took care of everything myself, there wouldn't be...
Well, Mr. Hale, tell just what happened when you came here yesterday morning.
Well, Harry and I had started to town with a load of potatoes. We came along the road from my place, and as I got here, I said, I want to see if I can't get John Wright to go in with me on a party telephone. I spoke to Wright about it once before, and he put me off, saying folks talk too much anyway, and all he asked was peace and quiet. I suppose you know about how much he talked to himself. But I thought maybe if I came to the house and talked about it before his wife, though I said to Harry that I didn't know what his wife wanted made much difference to John. But I thought I'd come anyway and see.
Mr. Hale, I do want to talk about that, but tell just now what happened when you got to the house.
Well, I didn't see or hear anything. I knocked at the door and still it was all quiet inside. I knew they must be up. It was past 8 o'clock. So I knocked again and thought I heard someone say, "Come in." Not sure. Not sure yet. But I opened the door, that door, and there in that rocker sat Mrs. Wright.
What was she doing?
She was rocking back and forth. She had her apron in her hand and was kind of pleating it.
How'd she look?
Well, she looked touched.
What do you mean touched?
Well, like she didn't know what she was going to do next. And kind of done up.
How'd you seem to feel about your coming, Mr. Hale?
Why, I don't think she minded one way or the other. She didn't pay much attention. I said, "How do, Mrs. Wright? It's cold out, ain't it?" And she said, "Is it?" And went on pleating her apron. Well, I was surprised. She didn't ask me to come up to the fire or to sit down, but just sat there, not even looking at me. So I said, "I want to see John." And then she laughed. I guess you would call it a laugh. I thought of Harry and the team outside, so I said a little sharp, "Can I see John?" "No," she said, kind of dull like. "But ain't he home?" says I. "Yes," she said, "he's home." "Well, then why can't I see him?" says I, out of patience. "'Cause he's dead," says she, and went on pleating her apron. "Dead?" says I. She just nodded her head, not getting a bit excited, but rocking back and forth. "Why, where is he?" says I, not knowing what to say. She just pointed upstairs, like, yeah. I got up with the idea of going up there. I walked from there to here. And then I says, "Why, what did he die of?" "He died of a rope around his neck," says she, and went on pleating her apron. Well, I went out and I got Harry. I thought I might need help. We went upstairs, and there he was lying.
I think I'd rather have you go upstairs where you can point it all out. Just go on now with the rest of the story.
Well, my first thought was to get that rope off. It looked. But Harry, he went up to him and he said, "Nah, he's dead all right, and we better not touch anything." So we came back downstairs. She was still sitting that same way. "Has anybody been notified?" I asked. "No," she said, unconcerned. "Who did this, Mrs. Wright?" said Harry. He said it all business-like, and she stopped pleating her apron. "I don't know," she said. "You don't know?" said Harry. "No," she said. "Well, weren't you sleeping in the bed with him?" said Harry. "Yes," said she, "but I was on the inside." "Somebody slipped a rope around his neck and strangled him, and you didn't wake up?" "I didn't wake up," she said after him. Well, we must have looked as if we didn't see how that could be, for after a minute she said, "I sleep sound." So, Harry was going to ask her more questions, but I thought she should tell her story first to the coroner or to the sheriff. So Harry went quick as he could to River's place where there's a telephone.
And what did Miss Wright do when she knew you had gone for the coroner?
She moved from this chair to that one over there and sat there with her hands held together and looking down. I got the feeling out to make some conversation, so I said I had come in to see if John wanted to put in a telephone.
A telephone?
And at that she laughed. And then she stopped and looked at me, scared.
Scared?
I don't know. Maybe you weren't scared. I wouldn't like to say it was. Soon Harry got back. Then Dr. Lloyd came. And then you, Mr. Peters. So, I guess that's all I know that you don't.
I guess we'll go upstairs and out to the barn and out there. Sheriff, you sure there's nothing important here? Nothing that would lead to any motive?
Nothing but kitchen things.
There's a nice mess.
Oh, her fruit. It did freeze. She worried about that when it turned so cold. She said the fire'd go out and her jars would break. Oh.
Can you beat women? Holding for murder, and she's worried about her preserves.
I guess before we're through, she'll have something more than worry about them preserves.
Yeah, women are used to worrying over trifles.
And yet, for all their worries, what would we do without the ladies? Dirty towels.
There's a great deal of work to be done on a farm.
And yet, I know there's some Dixon County farmhouses which do not have such fine towels.
Those towels get dirty awful quick. Men's hands aren't always as clean as they might be.
Loyal to your sex, I see. But you and Miss Wright were neighbors. I suppose you were friends too.
Well, I've not seen much of her of late years. I've not been in this house. It's more than a year.
Why was that? You didn't like her?
I liked her well enough. The farmers' wives have their hands full. And then,
Yes.
it never seemed a very cheerful place.
No, it's not cheerful, all right. I wouldn't say she had the homemaking instinct.
Well, I don't know as Wright had either.
I guess we'll go upstairs now. And Miss Peters, be on the lookout for anything that might be used to us.
Yes, Mr. Henderson.
I'd hate to have men coming in my kitchen, snooping around and criticizing.
Of course, it's no more than their duty.
Duty's all right, but I guess that deputy sheriff that came out here might have gotten a little of this on. I sure wish I'd thought of this sooner. Seems mean to criticize her for not having the place slicked up when she had to come away in such a hurry.
She had bread set.
She was going to put this in there. I feel awful bad about her fruit. I wonder if they're all gone. I think there's some that's all right. Yes, here. This is cherries, too. I declare, I think that's the only one. She's gonna feel awful bad about all her hard work in the warm weather. I remember the afternoon I put my cherries up last summer.
Well, I must get those things from the front room closet. Are you coming with me, Mrs. Hale? You can help me carry them. It's cold in there.
Right was close. I guess that's why she kept so much to herself. She wasn't even a member of the Ladies' Aid. I suppose she felt she couldn't do her part. And then, you don't enjoy things when you feel shabby. She used to wear pretty clothes and be lively when she was Minnie Foster, one of the town girls singing in the choir. But, oh, that was 30 years ago. Was that all you was to take in?
She said she wanted an apron. Funny thing to want, but there isn't much to get you dirty in jail, goodness knows. But I suppose just to feel more natural. She said they was in the top drawer of the cupboard over there, and her little shawl that always hung behind the door. Yes, here it is.
Mrs. Peters,
Yes, Mrs. Hale?
do you think she did it?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, I don't think she did. Asking for an apron and her little shawl, worrying about her fruit.
Mr. Peters says it looks bad for her. And Mr. Henderson is awful sarcastic in his speech. He's going to make fun of her saying she didn't wake up.
Well, I guess John Wright didn't either when they slipped that rope under his neck.
No. It had to be done all crafty and still. They say it was such a funny way to kill a man, rigging it all up like that.
That's just what Mr. Hale said. There was a gun in the house. He said that's what he can't understand.
Mr. Henderson said coming out that what was needed was a motive. Something to show sudden feeling or anger.
And come out here and try to turn her own house against her?
Of course, the law is the law. Hale.
I suppose it is. Better loosen up your things, Mrs. Peters. You won't feel them when you go out.
She was piecing a quilt.
Look, Mrs. Peters. This is the one she was working on. And look at the sewing. The rest of it's all nice and even, but look right here. It's all over the place. It's as if she didn't know what she was about.
Oh, Mrs. Hale, what are you doing?
I'm just pulling out a stitch or two that's not sewn very well. Bad sewing always made me fidgety.
I don't think we ought to touch things.
I'm just finish up this end.
Well, I must get these things wrapped up. They can be done sooner than we think. I wonder where I can find a piece of paper and string.
In that cupboard, maybe.
Why, here's a bird cage. Did she have a bird, Mrs. Hale?
I haven't been in here so long, I don't know if she did or not. There was a man that came around last year selling canary sheep, but I don't know if she took one. Maybe she did. She used to sing real pretty herself.
Seems funny to have a bird in a place like this. But she must have had one, or well, why would she have a cage? I wonder what happened to it.
Maybe the cat got it.
No, she didn't have a cat. She's got that feeling some folks get, being scared of them. My cat got in her room once and she got real upset and asked me to take it out.
My sister Bessie is like that. Odd, ain't it?
Why, look at the door, Mrs. Hale. It's broken. One hinge is pulled apart.
It's as if someone was rough with it.
Why, yes.
They were going to find some evidence. I sure wish they'd be about it. I don't like this place.
Well, I'm awful glad you came with me, Mrs. Hale. It would have been lonesome for me sitting here all alone.
It would, wouldn't it? But I tell you what I do wish, Mrs. Peters. I wish I had come out here sometimes when she was here. I wish I had.
Of course, you were awful busy, Mrs. Hale. You had your house and your children.
But I could have come. I stayed away because it weren't cheerful. But that's why I ought to have come. I never liked this place. Maybe because it's down in a hollow and you can't see the road. I don't know what it is, but this is a lonesome place. It always was. I wish I'd come to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I can see now.
You mustn't reproach yourself, Mrs. Hale. Sometimes we just don't see how it is with folks until something comes up.
Not having children makes less work, but it also makes a quiet house. And with Wright out at work all day, and no company when he did come in. Did you know John Wright, Mrs. Peters?
Not to know him. I've seen him around town. They say he was a good man.
Good, yes. He didn't drink. He kept his word as well as most, and he paid his debts. But he was a hard man, Mrs. Peters. Just to pass the time of day with him, ooh, it's like a raw wind that gets to the bone. I would think she would have wanted a bird. But what do you suppose went with it?
I don't know, unless it got sick and died.
You weren't raised around here, were you? You didn't know her.
Not till they brought her yesterday.
Come to think of it, she was like a bird herself. Real pretty and sweet, but timid and fluttery. you what, Mrs. Peters, why don't you take the quilt in with you? It'll take up her mind.
I think that's a nice idea, Mrs. Hale. And there couldn't possibly be any objection to it, could there? Now, just what would I take? I wonder if her patches are in here. And her things.
There's something red. Maybe he's just throwing things in it. Oh, look at this pretty box. Looks like something someone would give to you. Maybe her scissors are in here. Why, there's something wrapped in this silk.
Why? That isn't her scissors.
Mrs. Peters,
It's the bird.
and look at his neck. Oh, on the other side. Oh.
Somebody wrung its neck.
Well, ladies, have you decided whether she was gonna quilt it or not it?
We think she was going to not it.
Well, that's interesting, I'm sure. Has the bird flown?
We think the cat got it.
Is there a cat?
Mrs. Peters?
Oh, well, not now. They're superstitious, you know. They leave.
Well, no sign of anything out here. Let's go upstairs and go over it piece by piece. Come on now, Sheriff.
I'll go pull the team around.
She liked the bird. She was gonna bury it in this pretty box.
When I was a girl, my kitten, there was a boy who took a hatchet, and before my eyes, and before I could get there, if they would have held me back, I would have hurt him.
Wonder what it would have been like never to have any children around. Wright wouldn't have liked the bird. A thing that sang, she used to sing. He killed that too.
We don't know who killed the bird.
I knew John Wright.
It was an awful thing that happened in this house that night, Mrs. Hale. Killing a man while he slept, slipping a rope around his neck that choked the life out of him.
His neck choked the life out of him.
We don't know who killed him. We don't know.
If there had been years and years of nothing, and then a bird to sing to you, it would be awful. Still, after the bird was still.
I know what stillness is. When we homesteaded in Dakota, my first baby was born. He died after he was 2 years old. And me with no other than...
How long do you suppose they'll be looking for evidence?
I know what stillness is. But the law has got to punish crime, Mrs. Hale.
I wish you had seen her when she wore her white dress and her blue ribbons and stood up there and sang in the choir. I wish I'd come to see Minnie Foster sometimes. I might have known something was wrong. I know how it is for women.
We mustn't take on it.
But I wish I had come sometimes. Then I could have helped her. I tell you what, Mrs. Peters, don't tell her her fruit is gone. Tell her it ain't. Take this as evidence. She may never know if it's broke or not.
Man, it's a good thing the men couldn't hear us. Wouldn't they just laugh? Getting worked up over a little thing like a dead canary. I mean, like that could possibly have anything to do with...
No, Miss Peters.
Maybe they would, maybe they wouldn't.
It's perfectly all clear now. You should know juries when it comes to women. But there has to be some strange thing, some way of connecting what happened here.
Well, I've got the team pulled around. Pretty cold out there.
You want to see what Mrs. Peters is bringing in?
I'm gonna stay here a while myself. But you can send Frank in here, can't you? I guess there's not those dangerous things those ladies have picked out. For that matter, a wife is married to the law, isn't she, Miss Peters?
I don't think of it just that way.
Married to the law. Yep. Hey, George, let's come in here a minute. Check out these windows.
Ah, windows.
We'll be right there, Mr. Hale.
Well, Henry, at least found out she was not gonna quilt it. She was gonna, what is it you call it, ladies?
We call it knot it.
You like what I said?
You did great. Thank you all for coming, and feel free to hang out a little longer. I know we close pretty soon, but feel free to come up and say hi to the actors and your friends and family members.